From Wall Street to Main Street to help small business owners have the same capital as corporate America and give them the same resources as a larger company. We cover business funding, business credit, scaling, business consulting, and much more. Check out the website at shieldadvisorygroup.com. Welcome to the show, The Liquid Lunch Project.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Liquid Lunch Project. I am Matthew R. Meehan, alongside my partner, the Professor Luigi Rosabianca. What's on tap today, Lil?
Matt, as you know, running a business is not always a bed of roses, and stuff happens in business as in life. A business's reputation may take a ding. It could be as simple as a consumer complaint, or it could be an existential crisis like our buddies out in Seattle at Boeing are having right now. To do so and manage it properly and to come out smelling like a bed of roses, you need someone to help manage your reputation. And today we have John P. David, founder and CEO of David PR Group, who is an expert in reputation management. So much so that he wrote the textbook on reputation management, how to protect or destroy your reputation online. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
There's so much to unpeel today, John. I don't know where to start. Do you want to give us a couple examples on what a crisis for a business is? Because it does seem subjective.
Sure. No, it's absolutely subjective. I mean, I often say it's one company's, one organization's embarrassment, could be another organization's existential crisis. And it just depends on what happens. Here's a simple example, right? You're in a fast food restaurant, right? Let's say it's a McDonald's, it's a Burger King, it's one of those types of places, national restaurant chain kind of thing. And a mouse runs across the floor, right? You freak out, maybe your wife loses her mind, your kids scream, and you decide, okay, I'm not going back into that place again, maybe for a while. Now that is a embarrassment for, a major fast food chain, right? And it might get some attention, but it's not going to make the rest of the country, not want to go to McDonald's or In-N-Out Burger or Burger King or whatever, right? But if a mouse runs across the floor of the family-owned Italian place in your neighborhood,
game over,
that's kind of just getting by, right? It could be existential. Because all of a sudden, all their regulars who come in every Friday and Saturday night could decide, whoa, wait, hold on, maybe I shouldn't be going here, and they could be out of business in no time. So a crisis is relative, for number one. And so the most important thing is that every business should try to prepare as best they can to be able to manage a crisis if it hits.
But how do you manage a crisis? Is it writing an apology letter to the consumer? Is it now it's all social media and TV and newsworthy hype? How do you manage internally a crisis? And more importantly, how do you teach your internal team to manage a crisis?
Right. So I think the first thing is that you need to make sure there's simple things. You need to make sure you know how to reach everybody in your business, right? You have a good list of everybody's contact information just in case, just like when there's whatever, a major weather problem or something happens or there's some type of emergency, you need to know that you can reach everybody as best you can. So you can communicate as quickly with your internal people as you possibly can. The second thing is you want to make sure that you understand that your employees know what to do when there's a communications crisis, which is different from a traditional crisis, because we're talking about if there's, let's say there's TV truck shows up outside, right? Or there's a blogger who's posting about your business, or there's a social media post on Facebook which is talking about something that happened at your company. All these things happen. They happen all the time, frankly. But the point is, for your company, you want to make sure you have a media policy in place. And a media policy is it's a simple document that basically reminds your employees that they don't speak for your company, right? That your company, that the CEO is, and maybe your PR person is the spokesperson for your company. It's not your job to defend the reputation of the company, right? Unless we ask you to. We don't want everybody in the company to be, saying whatever they want about what's happening with the business. We want a designated spokesperson. We also want them to know, okay, if something happens, if a reporter calls, or someone, posts something on social media, who do you inform? Who do you tell? And that could be the head of communications. That could be the CEO. That could be a outside consultant guy who's got, he put his name and his phone number on there. So so that the crisis gets addressed as quickly as possible. So then the next question is, okay, how do you respond? And that's all relative to what it is. In some situations, you may just let it ride because it may not be as significant as it might look worse than it really is, right? If somebody posts, for example, they post something about your company and they post it on Twitter and it's fantastical, right? It doesn't make any sense. And it's not true. And they're not even they may not even be a customer of yours. And then you go on Twitter and you look and you say, okay, this person has 37 followers on Twitter, right? I don't think you do anything. I think you keep your eyes on it, but you don't go in there and jump in there and say, this one person who said this one thing that's fantastical. You don't necessarily want to respond to that right away because it's not really viable. But if a Instagram influencer with 1 million followers, and they're in your sphere, meaning that they have an impact on your business, well, then you've got a problem on your hands. You need to figure out how to respond to it. And the way that you generally respond to it would be within that same medium. In other words, if you're attacked on Instagram, you respond on Instagram, kind of thing. What's
your advice to a company that maybe has an employee or a principal that had an issue, let's say in his personal life or her personal life, like a very public divorce? But
sure.
That may affect his business or her business.
Well, absolutely. I think, listen, there's the first thing is that you obviously want your folks the people who work with you to, behave, right? The first thing is you're hoping that people are, follow the societal norms in their lives, but it doesn't always happen. I've seen, situations where, there was a lawyer who had this, bondage room in his house, and came up in his divorce papers and all this other stuff. And it can be very damaging. I think you have to, I think it goes on a case by case basis, but again, if your CEO is going through a high profile divorce, I think the important thing to state is that that's that person's personal business. That they're still focused on your company, on running the business, and that it's not going to, that divorce is not going to impact the company. And the reason it's not is because we have a deep bench, we have multiple offices, we have all these other things in place in case something were to change. We have, and it's the same thing that impacts, the same reason you have a succession plan in a company. You can call on all those things that you've done already to help back up and bolster your point.
So let me ask you a question. We had a client that was a contractor and he was doing really well in his local area. One of his competitors went out and they hired an army of people to go give negative reviews on the business. How would you handle something like that?
So it's tricky. You have to address them. It's hard to prove that they're not legitimate, but you can report on every social media site and every review site. There's a way of flagging reviews. And you can do it, and you don't even have to be in your company doesn't have to be, you don't have to be involved. So as an example, I have a friend of mine who has a business, and his he recently sold it, but it was I think it was called International Security or Integrated Security something systems, whatever. And he has this logo, and the logo looks, even though his logo looks like it said ISIS on it. So he's driving, then these trucks are driving around town, and it looks like it says ISIS on the side of these trucks, right? And so somebody posted on Yelp, this is incredible. It takes a picture of it and goes, how dare these people do this whole thing? And there's actually, and so I reported it because it wasn't an actual customer experience. So, and they took it down. Because it was one person's observation, is not, of a company is not necessarily a customer experience, and Yelp doesn't view that as a customer experience, so they took it down. And so you can go onto the review sites and say, listen, I believe this to be a fake review, and you have to try to bolster your case as much as you can. And they will get looked at, but they probably won't all get taken down. The best defense when it comes to review sites is offense. The best review is, talk to your existing customers and have them write reviews for you. No, don't make it part of, you can't sit them down at your company computer right after you've sold them, their watch or their wedding ring, and have them write it right on the spot how great your jewelry store is. You can't do that, because they'll see all the what they call them, the ISP addresses are all the same, and they'll so there's people tried that, and they got spanked pretty hard for it. But you can encourage people to give reviews, and there's software out there that'll help you, prompt people to do reviews, even over their phones and stuff like that. And that's really the best way to combat negative stuff.
John, let's talk about a couple of instances of poor reputation and crisis management. Me personally, I'm a product of Catholic school, and I'm 49 years old, and I've never in my life ever had any sort of negative inference or negative connotation with a church experience. It's been an amazing experience my whole life. I go to church every Sunday, and it's been immaculate. However, the Roman Catholic Church over the last 10 years has had a pretty bad black eye, and I think part of that is they managed it very poorly. What did they did wrong, and what could they have done better?
Well, I mean, I can one up you at least a little bit. I mean, I was my son's an Eagle Scout, so I was a scout leader.
Perfect example. Yep.
Scout leader for 10 years. It's a huge issue. It's a well-known issue. It's become a sort of it's like a societal. It's like it's a
punchline. It's a joke.
Yeah, perfect. That's a perfect way of describing it. It's part of it's a joking part of the joking culture of things, and I think, and listen, I don't think and again, I'm not a practicing Catholic, but I grew up Catholic. And I've seen that. I've looked at this case study, and they haven't done a great job. They haven't done a great job of communicating what's happened. I'm sorry.
You open your Christmas gifts.
That's right. That's right. So they haven't done a great job of transparency, and there's been lots of issues where they've it was operational for the Catholic Church, meaning they bad actor, and instead of it's taking that basically firing that person, whatever you do, they reassign them somewhere else on the other side of the country. They did some operationally things bad. And so they have to do a better job of communicating how things are different now. And so, like I was saying before, so I was my son was in the Boy Scouts, and they have the same thing. It's like every time I would tell some whatever. 1 out of 5 times I would tell someone that my son was in the Boy Scouts, somebody would make a wisecrack, right? Yeah. But they have they operationally in the Boy Scouts and the Cub Scouts all the way on up, they put in rules and regulations that say you have to have what they call 2 deep leadership, meaning you can't have no kid can be alone with an adult. So you have to have 2 adults every time you do anything with boys, now girls in Scouts. And so now they haven't done a great job of communicating that either, but that's the solution. Whenever anybody would say that to me, they'd say, well, are you ever worried about your kids? And I would say, this is the rule. You have to follow the rule. And as an adult leader, I actually followed those rules very closely because I was nervous myself. I don't want someone to say, hey, you were alone with my kid. Right. So the Catholic Church, I think they haven't done a very good job of communicating that, but that's really a global issue that they have to work on.
Let's talk about another bad example. I think the 3 of us here were pretty old fashioned. When we fly a plane, we expect the wings to stay on and the doors to stay on.
Sure.
For some reason, that's no longer the case. What could Boeing have done differently over the last basically 5 years of mishaps, and to better protect
Yeah, I
the
think
flyer?
Boeing is a company that's having that's really in an existential communications crisis right now. I mean, they have they've stranded 2 astronauts in space. They're not who can't don't get to come back till February. You think about that. You're supposed to go up for 3 days and you're not coming back till February. My gosh. And then door flies off. And then you had the issue with the Max 8 and the redesign and the fact that those planes crashed and that they didn't properly train the pilots to fly those planes. And they have not done a good job. Although I will say it's an extremely difficult situation that they're in because it's so high profile. It's such a situation where it impacts so many people, and they're such a big company. But they have not done a great job of explaining, why you should continue to fly, on Boeing airplanes. They're really staying in business because there's really no other choice, and that's
With all fairness,
not the case you want to be in.
with all fairness, though, they did try. The whistleblower's dead. They tried to silence it.
That's right. We didn't even mention that there was actually, it was like, yeah, no, there were like 2 whistleblowers that died. It's like a John Grisham
Was it
novel.
2 of them? I know one of them
There
was.
were 2. No, there were 2 within a span of within a couple of months. That's the other part. I think that they've changed CEOs a couple times. That can help. Because they really they have to show that the culture is changing and that they're implementing a true like safety oriented culture, but they haven't done a good job of explaining what they're doing that's different. And the part of the problem is that there's a lot of stories out there that are kind of scary about how they've built these planes. They've changed how they don't manufacture planes from soup to nuts in Seattle anymore. They get built in one part of the plane gets built in one part of the country, another part of the plane gets built in another part of the country. They bring all the 2 parts, the 2 big pieces to Seattle, and they're supposed to click together like Legos, and it's not working. And it's saved them a ton of money, and it's saved them a lot of costs, and it's saved them a lot of interest on assets and stuff, but it's hurt their safety record. And so there's things like that. They just have not done a good job of communicating those points of how they're changing their culture. And that's why they're kind of shuffling through CEOs, but they're so big that they're not, that they're I mean, whatever, you guys are in finance, so too big to fail is kind of a funny phrase, but they're so big that it's hard. It's hard for them to imagine a world without them.
So what would have their best move been? To take accountability, fire the CEO, and start moving forward right away instead of letting him stay around?
Yeah,
Or
I think that they've got it. I think
it's one thing after another.
Yeah, here's the thing is I think they tried to do that, but I think they ended up with I think that it was one thing after another. If you look at the 3 big things that happened to them, right? The one was the Max 8s that had the issues with the software and the stalls and all that stuff, and the two planes that crashed. And then next you had the door issue where the door flew off while folks were flying. So those are two separate things. That's kind of like, those aren't, it's not like there's, the same 2 guys built those, were in charge of those 2 systems. It's like multiple people, but it's cultural. Clearly the safety's cultural. And then the last one is, they're in an effort to try to like turn their reputation around, they shot these 2 folks into space, and now they're stuck up there. So I mean, it's like on one thing on top of the other. I think if they had if they've really made a big cultural change push and promoted that, then I think they'd be in a much better shape reputationally right now.
In today's day and age with the internet, social media, cameras on everybody's phone, if you don't make a big enough statement out of the gate, people are going to find something else to dig up on you, or these undercover influencers going in and trying to do exposés, right? That happened all over the internet too. what is the best position for a company? You just can't sweep anything under the rug anymore.
No, I mean, you're absolutely correct. I mean, there's it's funny that you mentioned that. So like I have this, this line that was in my book about how, I was in a restaurant with a friend of mine, and I said, how many cameras are in this restaurant? And I looked up, and and he looked up, and they were like, these little these dome cameras that are all around the place. He says, yeah, I don't know, about 8. And I said, yeah, that's true. There are 8 there are 8 in the ceiling, except there's one in every pocket of every person who's in the place. So there's actually, 58 phones in this place. And so, yeah, it's much harder to pretend things didn't happen, because everywhere you turn, there's someone with a phone. I mean, there are so many. I don't know if you guys are follow the NFL football, but I mean, and not to date the time on your podcast here, but just a few days ago in Miami, we had the wide receiver Tyreek Hill. He got pulled over and taken out of his McLaren and handcuffed and put on the ground. And there's so much footage of it, because everybody who was going to the game, saw it happening, and a lot of there's a lot of really avid Dolphin fans are like, oh my God, that's Tyreek Hill. And so there's all this film of it, and so that it's everywhere. So you have to, in these days, you have to just quickly, assess what you're going to do, and own up if you're in the wrong. Otherwise, you're going to be in trouble, because the truth will come out eventually.
John, let me ask you an opinion. Imagine that we could get the Democrats and the Republicans to agree on one thing, and they hired you to help the U.S. government improve its reputation, because Lord knows the American taxpayer has lost a lot of faith in the federal system. How would you start improving the reputation of the government?
What did I do to you guys to deserve this question? What? I've been very nice. Everything's been very clean. I haven't brought up any politics. I talked about sports. Think about it. Covers religion and all that stuff.
The government's role is a some certain. You're supposed to provide some basic services, keep the highways running, the bridges should stay suspended, and there should be some sort of border controls. Okay. And we should know that when we pay our taxes, the red lights and green lights should be working. But for some reason, we've lost faith that that stuff is going to work and work efficiently. I mean, I don't know the last time an Amtrak train was on time. How would you go about improving probably what's the largest organization in the world?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we'll talk about a loaded question, but right now it's really hard. It's hard to agree. It's hard to agree on anything. It's like hard to go to Capitol Hill and ask them what color is the sky, and you're gonna get like 75 different answers.
Mm-hmm.
I guess again, this hypothetical, for which I'm just I'm barely agreeing to answer for you guys.
You guys at the bar, pal.
is that I think you say things like, okay, Amtrak doesn't is barely on time, but you do get your mail every day, right? There's a lot of things that government does that they do well, and it's now like in my community, it's much easier now to do things like renew your car registration, and to pay your water bill, and all these things that local government do, and hopefully, I live in an area where 20 years ago it incorporated and became its own village, and now if I have to call the police, they'll be here in like 2.5 minutes. So like government does a lot of things right, but it's also, they're kind of like other industries where when they do something wrong, it gets dramatically amplified. Finance is an area like that, and banking, if you I challenge you to go find a bank on Yelp that's got better than 3-star rating, because whenever you do something goes wrong with your money, you're just
every day in the news is a $2 billion fine, a $3 billion fine.
Yeah, but when you mess with somebody's money, you're livid, right? And that you get livid. And so there's certain industries that are they're always going to get a bad rap, and government's one of those. It's just one of those things. I think it's just always going to get.
But you gave the government great advice. give more power to the local municipalities and local government and make the federal government smaller. Genius. Great advice.
No, I didn't say that. No, wait, hold on. There you go again. I say amplify the good news. That would be what my thesis would be, is like amplify the good news of what you do. In other words,
So make my mailman
I expect my mail, but at the same time you say, listen, I expect my mail to be here every day. But like, by the way, guess what? That's like, it happens every day, and every once in a while something doesn't happen. But I mean, like, remember when we used to get newspapers, and I don't know if I delivered newspapers when I was a kid, and so there were days, I'm guessing, Lou, there might've been days when, whatever, you decided to, play ball instead of deliver the papers on time, or you fell asleep instead of, taking a nap after school, or you didn't get up in the morning.
Rainy and snowy days. Oh, it was the
worst. I delivered papers in the snow when I was a kid, but there are days when you just like, you missed the house, and all of a sudden they're calling, where's my paper? So it's like, I think we amplify the good news and the positives, but it's very tough because of right now in the United States, it's just, there's such a divisive, we've drawn these political lines, and it's incredibly divisive. I'll just leave it at that.
John,
how did you get into public relations?
So I actually studied journalism and public relations in college. I went to the University of Florida, and so I took journalism classes and PR classes, and when I got out of school, I got a job in a PR agency, and I was lucky to do it. It was in a time when I got out of school in 1990. We're in a really terrible economy, and I started out just as a publicist, and worked my way up, worked at some bigger organizations until I was at what was at the time the largest PR firm in Florida. I'm not sure if they still are or not. And I was managing their corporate group, and then I decided to go out on my own, and I started my own consulting business. And I was a traditional publicist for a long time, and that industry has changed pretty dramatically. In 2015, 2016, I was pretty actively blogging about communications and crisis and online issues. And I would get phone calls from people like, I'm dealing with this type of thing. Well, I got a bad review. What do I do? I gotta, this is being said about me online. What do I do? I started writing blog posts about it. And then eventually I kind of strung all those blog posts together and said, holy cow, I could write a book about this. And so I ended up, taking that as my outline, and I wrote a book, and not knowing how to write a book, but trying to write a book. And I ended up getting a book deal, and getting an agent, and getting a book deal, and all that stuff. And I wrote my book.
Which, by the way, is called How to Protect or Destroy Your Reputation Online. And you can find that wherever famous books
wherever books are sold. Yeah. Amazon's probably the easiest these days, but it was in bookstores and all that stuff. And I did a book launch and book tour, Miami Book Fair, and spoke about it and stuff. And then I started dealing with, and a lot of these online reputation issues are kind of a crisis. Like they're like companies are really they're really in trouble. Like so I started doing more kind of crisis communications, and that's where that part of my practice has evolved. I don't do as much strictly online as much as I do, a more kind of traditional PR crisis. So, and which can be anything. So,
John, you got to tell us, just between the three of us, without naming names, what was the toughest crisis you ever had to help a client overcome?
So it's a little bit sad. So the toughest situation I ever got was I got a call from a guy who had he was a construction in the construction industry. He had a general contractor, and he had some I believe he had some mental issues, and he went to he was in a Starbucks, and he got into an argument with the employee at Starbucks, and the someone in the Starbucks took out their phone, and he was just like, railing against this employee, and it was really bad. It was really, he just kind of was, unhinged, about this whole thing. And then it got sent to, the local TV station, and they ran a story about it. And the next day, he lost all his clients.
Wow.
And yeah, I mean, he was like, he had like 4 or 5 acting jobs, and they all fired him. And I met the guy, and I kind of sat down with him and had a conversation, like, and he was in denial about what happened to him. He was kind of like, I can't believe that person did that to me. That, in other words, he was in denial about the person who took out their phone. Like, he was like, I can't believe if that person hadn't taken out their phone, everything would be fine.
I just wanted my doppio macchiato.
Sorry?
I just wanted my doppio macchiato.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I was just trying to have a coffee. And so the worst case was that, so this guy, anyway, he ended up, I represented him for about a day and a half. He ended up, turning on me and going, well, you've I hired you to fix this. You couldn't fix it. And I had I'd been on board for 36 hours. And I said, we're gone. Here's your check. Here's your check back. Here, we're good. We're out, and off he went. And it was sad because he had, his issues, ended up, destroying his business. And so, I mean, that's the saddest one. The most gratifying one was really interesting was, so I had a client in the financial services world, in the insurance industry, and they were kind of in a nascent part of the insurance industry. And this is back in the early 1990s. And my client had built up a very successful company. And there was a bad actor in their industry who approached them, and he started doing business with this guy, and who had a lot of money, flashed a lot of money, and had decided that he wanted to try to invest in my client's company, and had stroked some really big checks. But then my client got a call from the FBI going, this guy's not a good person. And my client called me, and I said, he told me what was going on. And I said, he thought, my client thought that it was either the mob or a big Ponzi scheme that this guy was involved with. He wasn't sure what it was. And I said, and he said, my biggest concern is that I think this could destroy my whole industry. Like, not only my company, but the whole industry that we're in. And so I ended up, talking to a reporter at the Wall Street Journal about this whole thing, and we blew the whistle on this Ponzi scheme, and it ended up being a $100 million fraud.
Wow.
My client, again, he was the Ponzi schemer, had wanted to buy his business to create a trail to make it look like he was legit. So my client ended up leaving that relationship and being the hero, and he ended up testifying against the guy, and the guy ended up getting to, he did time. He was on American Greed. It was a whole big thing. But we turned the crisis around. We turned it around, and completely by kind of going to the right, using the right communications tactic, and with the right messaging, and also with obviously a really juicy story.
That's awesome. John, why don't you tell the audience where they could find you and get in touch with you in case anybody...
Sure. My easiest place is my website, davidpr.com. So that's davidpr.com. My contact information is on there. My phone number's on there. There's a contact form. You can set up a meeting. I always like to say that this is a topic that's near and dear to me. I'm fascinated by these types of situations, and so I'm always open to talk to anybody about what's going on and how I can help them. If I can't help them, I'll try to point them in the right direction. So I field a lot of calls like that. So I'm always open. If when in doubt, give me a call.
Awesome.
John, thank you so much for being here. I want to be respectful of your time. I do have one question for you. It's more of a curiosity on my own. As we said before, we're in a world of cameras. There's a camera in everybody's pocket, and we're talking about business owners right now, strictly. But I mean, it's almost like everybody needs some type of crisis communicator right now, because even if you're an employee at a company, you could lose your job. right?
Sure.
If you don't respond properly. Is that an industry that's been formed or you've seen pop up for people that aren't business owners? I guess they're there for celebrities. What about
I mean,
almost
I think that I think the policies are, I think the policies are in place at a lot of big companies, and that that folks have kind of learned that they got to keep their, you know, they've got to kind of try to, toe the line as best they can. Um, but it's definitely a challenge. I mean, the good news is that, it's probably harder for, whatever guys like you and me, or who aren't like what they call digital natives. You didn't grow up with a smartphone in your pocket,
Yeah.
so I mean, I have 20, my kids are 24 and 22, and they've had a phone since they were in 5th or 6th grade. And one of the things that's interesting is they don't really communicate that much publicly anymore. They communicate with their friends in like a closed loop. So they're on like a Snapchat that's just their friends, or they communicate privately. They don't have public profiles, that they're posting to all the time on Instagram. And so they're very, vigilant about what they post. I mean, my kids maybe a little bit more so because of what I what I do and what I've said to them. But I've seen it mostly from a lot of folks who are just like, I mean, one of the things I always tell people is that, everything you do does not deserve to be a tweet. Sorry, you're not that interesting. I mean, you don't have to. Now there's obviously folks out there who are making a lot of money by posting pictures of themselves in different states of whatever, or because they look good they look good in designer wear, or with jewelry on, or in whatever swimsuits or whatever it is. But most of us, we're just the average folks, and we should just kind of toe the line. And then back to your Lou's question from before is, politics it's one to steer clear of as best you can, online. You just get, too many people get riled up, and you can be seemingly aligned with somebody, and then still they think you're crazy, right?
John, did you want to mention you running for governor of Florida during this podcast? You want to have another one afterwards?
I'm running for nothing. Running for my life. It's an interesting time. It's interesting times. So interesting times. But the thing is that, like, I was just on Facebook earlier today, and someone posted an image with reference to the most recent presidential debate, and these are all like people who I went to like elementary school and like middle school, and there's like this vicious argument going on back and forth, one side, the other side, one side, the other side, all these people going at it, and I was just reading it. I just said, and I just chimed in myself. I just said, all our social studies teachers would be proud. That's all I wrote. I wrote they'd just be proud that we're talking about it. But I don't like where I fit on it. I try not to get into it. You never know. You guys have multiple clients. They probably have different political views. I'm sure there's some that you're closer to than others, and you're aligned with and not. But it's a minefield. It's a minefield.
Yep. John, thank you so much for being here. Everybody, that's a wrap of the Liquid Lunch Project. We'll see you in the next episode.
Great.
Thank you for listening to the show, and make sure you subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you on the next episode of the Liquid Lunch Project.